It all starts after the so-called Day of Reversal, which left a trail of chaos and destruction. From that point on, the world entered a 100-year war against the demon race. This was a war that plunged all the kingdoms into complete darkness for a very long time. The result was catastrophic, with 290,000 dead from the Federation and 4.8 million civilians. Now the demon army has advanced and is at humanity's last line of defense. On top of that, they threaten the pass of Jokun Mountain, a sacred site. With that, the situation became desperate, and defeat was almost certain. However, even with all this chaos, life for the soldiers went on. Despite everything, their lives didn't change, with each one holding their post. Suddenly, a figure emerges from the darkness, asking about something called a transcendent. Approaching, our hero calls the guard sentry gate over for a chat. Then our main character grabs the guard's sword in a pretty intimidating way. The guard is frozen, completely caught off guard by the young man's actions. Turning his back, our hero asks if transcendents are exempt from duty. The guard, still a bit nervous, replies, "No, sir, they are not exempt." Our hero then warns him that there are a lot of people waiting to take him out for being careless. Therefore, he orders that starting tomorrow, no one drinks water, takes off their armor, sits or sleeps. Right after, he gives more orders to another soldier about the movement of the elite troops. The next day, the camp's flag flutters in the wind, heralding a new day. Inside a tent, our main character wakes up suddenly, looking terrified of something. A soldier enters the tent and wakes up our hero, who we now know is named Gate. He then realizes he was dreaming about his rookie days, which makes him pretty ticked off. Without wasting any time, our protagonist starts getting ready for another day of duty. Now on his feet with his sword in hand, Gate asks who was on watch last night. An elven archer named Scully informs him that it was Morris from the second magic class. She explains that the dwarf Moai caused a ruckus in the morning looking for him, and it woke everyone up. The problem is, the commotion draws the attention of the high-ranking officers, who are super strict. Because of this, Scully warns Gate that even if they let it slide, the higher-ups won't. Our hero then tells Morris to reflect on his actions because he's not covering for him anymore. Changing the subject, our protagonist asks the archer for the day's enlistment roster. Scully mentions that a scripture says this new group might contain a transcendent. It's then explained that on Jokun Mountain, there are 10 legendary weapons called the Deca weapons. Those who manage to pull one of these weapons from the mountain are classified as transcendents. And according to the prophecy of the great prophet Saint Bynes, this has a greater purpose. Because when 10 transcendents gather, they can finally defeat the demon lord. Back in the present, Gate complains about having to evaluate the black magic division when he's a swordsman. Scully reminds him that so far, only 2 have managed to become transcendents, him and the mage, Morris. She believes in the prophecy and asks our hero to treat the next chosen one well when they show up. The two then comment on a squad leader named Uldring, who has an inferiority complex. And with the image of the Black Dragon Demon Lord, the hope is that this brutal war will finally end. The perks of being a transcendent are incredible, with triple the pay and even a statue. Scully then warns him about a rumor that the brigade might be split up if there's one more deserter. Our hero cracks a smile and says that he's not the one who chooses the transcendent. The weapon is, besides. He explains that if they lose this territorial battle, it's game over. Suddenly, the two realize that the high-ranking officer, Uldring, has arrived earlier than usual. Without wasting a second, Gate and Scully salute the officer, who greets them. Thus, we are introduced to Uldring, a high-ranking black mage from the Dark Elf race. Our protagonist is clearly bothered by his presence, but decides to start the selection. Right in front of them, several volunteers from the Black Magic Division are lined up awaiting orders. The crowd of recruits is pretty large, and they all seem anxious for what's to come. Gate observes them, and since they're black magic volunteers, he's already expecting to find some shady characters. And indeed, he thinks to himself that there are rotten people everywhere. The appearance of some of the new recruits already confirms our hero's suspicions. Taking a step forward, our protagonist yells for everyone to pay attention. He gets annoyed by their weak response, and demands they shout with twice the force. With the image of a tiger behind him, our hero asks how many times he needs to tell them. Finally, the recruits respond properly, yelling "attention" with all their might. Satisfied, Gate explains that one of them will become a transcendent and remain in the unit, and even those who aren't chosen will be sent to important positions in the army. Finally, he calls up recruit number 7, the top of the class, named Swan, and says she looks apathetic. During the evaluation, our hero is startled by the eyes of recruit Zania, number 29. Soon after, he notices recruit number 13, Nartz Windsor, the only son of a rich family. The Beckenberg family is known for its immense fortune and extremely valuable jewels. They are a noble house of dark elves, famous for their strong paternal heritage. Nartz wears so many expensive rings that his fingers are turning purple, showing he's quite spoiled. Gate then formally introduces himself as the instructor standing before them all. He reveals that he is a transcendent, and the guide for the special task force they will be a part of. The recruits are shocked and wonder if the sword on his back is a Deca weapon. The scene shifts to Morris, the gnome who is also a transcendent, and he seems terrified of something. Now Morris is with the recruits, taking down uniform sizes for exchange. Suddenly, he's stunned to see that recruit number 13 has asked to exchange everything. Morris then realizes it's Nartz, one of the troublemakers Scully had mentioned. The gnome's expression gives away all his stress as Gate watches him from a distance. Our hero thinks that the bad recruits are obvious and plans to get rid of them soon. At that moment, Uldring approaches and calls our protagonist's name imposingly. The Dark Elf informs him that he will personally escort the new recruits to their barracks. Scully suspects he wants to confiscate something, but Gate tells her to pretend she didn't see anything. Then the archer says her goodbyes, saying she needs to sleep, and our hero dismisses her. Alone with Morris, our protagonist notices that the gnome doesn't look well at all. Worried, Gate approaches the trembling Morris and asks what's wrong. Suddenly, Gate remembers a violent attack that happened a while back. The scene shows the knight Jaga about to kick the small Morris on the ground. Next, the knight stomps hard on the gnome's head, who is unable to defend himself. We are then introduced to Jaga, a high-ranking knight who looks very angry. The poor gnome can only groan in pain with the knight's boot on his face. A soldier even asks Jaga to stop, but Gate says that gnomes can take a hit. Jaga then asks why the gnome doesn't get up as Morris bleeds on the ground. With a smile, he points to the gnome and says that he's perfectly fine. But when Morris gets up, Jaga attacks him again with his axe. Seeing this, our hero finally decides to intervene and stops Jaga's blow. The knight is furious with his actions and asks if our hero is challenging him. Our hero then stares him down seriously and introduces himself to the knight. He even asks if Jaga wants to get another scar on his face, as a threat. Our protagonist's glare is terrifying and shows he's not messing around. The scene then takes us to the vague prophecy from the scripture, which is still a great mystery. And as the long wait dragged on, someone finally pulled a Deca weapon, and those were Gate and Morris, who became the troop's new transcendents. But many soldiers doubt the prophecy and treat it as a simple legend. And in the midst of this brutal war, the balance of power is extremely fragile, because this balance is maintained only by the hierarchy and power of the strongest. With so many different species in the army, the order needs to be even more rigid. The illusion called transcendent is just bait to keep everyone in line. Jaga then asks if Gate is protecting the gnome just because he's also a transcendent. The knight repeats our hero's threat, asking if he wants another scar. However, Gate doesn't flinch and maintains his firm, threatening stare at the knight. The two glare at each other in a moment of pure tension, ready to fight. Suddenly, the archer Scully arrives, yelling Jaga's name, looking very worried. Her arrival interrupts the fight that was about to break out between the two. Jaga gets annoyed by the interruption and asks what the elf wants with him. She informs him that an officer is calling the knights for an important meeting. The knight then makes up a lame excuse about some missing spears. Angrily, Jaga says he'll meet them at the barracks and storms off. On his way out, he even bumps into Scully and tells the girl to get out of his way. Scully then asks what happened, and Gate says that Jaga's always been a piece of work. Our hero approaches Morris, who says he's fine because he used a defense spell. Gate gets angry because Jaga came all this way just to mess with the gnome. Scully quickly realizes that he's also got his eye on Nartz, the rich recruit. Our protagonist warns Morris to be careful because Jaga has an inferiority complex. Gate tells the gnome to use his head instead of just apologizing to him. Back in the present, our hero asks why Morris is unwell, and he says it's a species-related problem. Morris then explains that gnomes have a metabolism that's 1.7 times faster. Furthermore, 95% of them are lactose intolerant, which is pretty bad. Gate complains that no one in this unit is normal, which stresses him out, so he tells them both to leave and says he needs to check on the recruits now. Arriving at the rookies' barracks, the atmosphere seems very heavy and silent. Inside, we see recruit Xenia, number 29, who has a very strange look in her eyes. She's sitting near Swan, recruit number 7, who seems very uncomfortable. Swan then wonders why this psycho is staring at her out of nowhere. But Xenia doesn't stop staring and keeps up her weird and creepy face. Suddenly, another recruit enters the tent, catching everyone's attention. He's carrying a pack of cigarettes, and Swan remembers a guy who hit on her. The scene then shifts to the past, at the entrance of a club called Redonia. Inside the bar, Swan and a friend were talking about how her ex cheated on her with a dwarf. At that moment, the weird elf from the present approaches their table. With a cheap pickup line, he asks if they want to hang out with him and a friend. Swan cuts him off immediately and says they're in the middle of a serious conversation. Awkwardly, the guy says he'll be back in 5 minutes to see if she changes her mind. Her friend then asks why she shut him down since he seemed decent, and Swan replies that she prefers more masculine guys over those scrawny types. The scene returns to the present, and Swan thinks that those were the good old days. The elf who hit on Swan starts giving orders about tetanus shots. Swan is outraged and asks why they need shots when there are healers. But the guy just demands discipline and tells everyone to shout their replies louder. After giving his orders, he finally leaves the tent, leaving the others behind. As soon as he's gone, a very awkward silence fills the entire place. Swan thinks about how this whole situation is just way too weird. A recruit next to her then starts complaining about the elf who just left. However, another recruit tells her to shut up and stay in her lane. The argument heats up, and the two start cussing each other out and challenging one another in front of everyone. Swan gets even more annoyed, wondering what these idiots are doing. Just then, our hero Gate arrives at the entrance of the tent for the daily inspection. He enters, and all the recruits fall silent in the presence of their instructor. The tension is so thick that Swan even swallows hard out of pure nervousness. Suddenly, Nartz, recruit 13, complains that she accidentally bumped into him. Swan gets irritated because the guy has a look of disgust that would push anyone away. She then moves away, thinking he's a total scumbag in every possible way. Meanwhile, Gate looks at the exchange requests and sees they are all from one person. Nartz then stands up and proudly says that the exchange requests are his. He starts making an excuse about his family's fortune and color tones. Our hero cuts him off and tells him to cut the crap and just wear the uniform. With a smirk, Nartz tries to send one of the other recruits in his place. Our hero then asks what he's doing and tells the guy to get in line. The rich recruit starts to have a meltdown, repeating our protagonist's words. Suddenly, Nartz snaps and yells not to play mind games with him. Gate just watches the scene with a sour face and zero patience. The situation makes all the other recruits in the tent very uncomfortable. The rookies are completely confused and wonder what that psycho just said. Swan, completely fed up with all the nonsense, curses under her breath, annoyed with the scene. Our protagonist then finds the perfect solution and orders everyone to hit the deck. Immediately, all the recruits get into the push-up position as punishment. Gate warns them that he'll let it slide today, but next time he'll make their lives a living hell. In response, all the rookies shout loudly that they understood the instructor's message. Meanwhile, Nartz struggles immensely to hold the difficult punishment position. The spoiled kid clearly can't handle the tough military training. The next day, all the recruits are lined up to get the so-called tetanus shot. Scully administers the injection to one of them, who wonders why an archer is doing this. Next to Gate, little Morris asks if they really need to get the shot. Our hero then tells the story of Drenane, a healer with a prosthetic leg. She was injured by a goblin and healed wrong because she was just a healer. Gate explains that tetanus is just as deadly as any weapon, and Morris is terrified by this. Gate explains that not even the great archmage Vilcross could defeat tetanus. Our hero gives a little smirk, looking quite pleased with his explanation. Suddenly, he hears shouting and wonders why there's so much noise coming from the recruits. Scully then approaches in a panic, and our protagonist asks what happened. The archer yells that recruit number 13 simply vanished from the line. Our protagonist is shocked and furious at the news of the disappearance. He remembers Nartz's face and curses the kid with pure rage for running away. The image of the spoiled, annoying recruit comes back to him in full force. Our hero then yells, asking who was responsible for escorting the rookies. Scully replies that Jaga brought them and told them to start the injections without a head count. Gate understands that it was Jaga's fault and asks if anyone saw where Nartz went. Recruit Xenia raises her hand and says her special skill is Eagle Eye. Our protagonist then asks the girl if she can see the runaway. Using her special ability, Xenia manages to locate Nartz from a great distance. She points to the mountain and says the guy is heading that way right now. Scully and Morris are confused because that's the mountain behind the camp. Gate then realizes that's where the hill of the Deca weapons is and understands the plan. Meanwhile, Nartz walks alone, believing he is the next one chosen by the prophecy. He arrives at the Jokun mountain pass with an air of pure superiority. There, he finds a magic staff and believes the weapon was prepared just for him. The scene flashes back to the argument over the uniform, and our hero thinks Nartz is just an idiot. On top of that, other recruits feel humiliated and complain about the mockery they're enduring. Back in the present, Nartz smiles, believing it's time to show his true power. With his hand on the staff, he says he's going to shut up everyone who looked down on him. Suddenly, the spoiled kid is startled by a desperate scream coming from the darkness. Nartz then looks back and sees Gate and Morris running towards him at full speed. Our protagonist yells that if he touches the weapon, his arm will be destroyed instantly. However, the spoiled recruit threatens to touch the staff if they move another inch. Gate stops in his tracks, furious, and little Morris is terrified by the situation. Nartz believes this is all a cheap trick to break his will with pressure. Our hero is confused and asks what nonsense he's talking about, telling him to come down. The young man then introduces himself as the heir to the Beckenberg family and accuses Gate of being afraid. Our protagonist explodes, yelling that Nartz has the lowest score of all the recruits, and that his strength and magic are so weak they're like a tree goblin's. He even tries to explain that not even a transcendent can pull the weapon without a ritual. The rich recruit asks if our hero is judging him like any ordinary person. He believes that incredible people face rejection, and that his destiny is to guide the foolish. Therefore, Nartz decides he will pull the Deca weapon and accept the destiny given to him. Gate screams desperately for him not to do it, but it's too late to stop him, and with an intense purple glow, the weapon reacts to Nartz's touch, surprising him. The weapon unleashes a violent purple energy that hits Nartz head-on with immense force. The spoiled recruit is thrown backward, with no chance to react to the Deca weapon's power. Seeing the scene, our hero and Morris rush to help, while Gate curses the kid out. Nartz is now on the ground, crying and drooling, completely defeated by the weapon. Morris approaches and wonders what that pathetic creature on the ground is. Our protagonist then tells the gnome to get down the mountain because there's no more time. Meanwhile, elsewhere, black magic is explained as a very dangerous curse. Pladring then announces that today's training will be resistance to the devouring mist. Swan thinks the ability is useful, but it also hits allies, which is why they train resistance. The dark elf then summons a large sphere of black magic to begin the training. All the recruits enter the mist with protective cloths, one by one, in order. And the girl reflects that the only reason for this would be if one dark elf attacked another. Suddenly, Uldring yells for everyone in there to remove their protective masks immediately. Swan is furious with the order and clutches the cloth on her face in disbelief. She complains that the training is barbaric and only serves to force them to adapt. Without protection, all the recruits start to feel sick and suffocate in the mist. The instructor then approaches one of the rookies who is suffering from the training. The dark elf holds him tightly as the young man cries out in pain from the magic's effect. To make matters worse, Uldring orders everyone to sing a military song in the middle of the chaos. In the midst of it all, recruit Swan remains standing, firm and strong, enduring the pain. Swan cries in pain and thinks that Uldring is a very cruel kind of guy. Uldring says that a transcendent becomes his assistant, but the treatment is anything but good. The girl then wonders if she could put up with the mood of that guy she hates so much. However, the rewards of a transcendent are great, and she decides she will persevere. She thinks the system has its flaws, but being a transcendent would free her from annoying veterans. Procling Arva finally ends the training, and the girl is relieved it's over. Already outside, everyone rests for 5 minutes before the next stage of the day. Swan then reflects that being an orphan, she just wants to save money and get out of the army. Her only goal is very simple, not to die and to live for at least 500 years. Suddenly, Uldring notices the arrival of our hero and Morris in the distance. Swan also sees the two approaching and is very curious about the scene. Our protagonist then arrives carrying Narts on his back, and Swan thinks he got caught. Uldring approaches and asks our hero what happened, and if the kid is dying. At that moment, Scully arrives in a panic and says there are no healers nearby. Gate asks Morris if he can help, but the gnome says that buffs and healing are two different things. The dark elf also says he can't do anything since his magic only causes damage. Our hero tells Scully to look again, and she runs off to check the holy water fountain. Then, recruit number 7, Swan, raises her hand, drawing everyone's attention. She says with confidence that she can solve the problem using her black magic. Uldring and our protagonist are shocked and ask what she just said. In disbelief, Swan analyzes the situation and realizes Narts has a cursed creature on him. It's a type of magical parasite called a dentacula that's sucking his life force. The girl explains that she can weaken the parasite using a black magic spell. However, Uldring doesn't believe her and tells her to stop talking nonsense and wait for the healers. Our hero then agrees with the idea and says that since it's an emergency, she should try. He adds that if it doesn't work, they'll just wait for help to arrive. Swan then asks to borrow Uldring's staff, leaving the dark elf quite surprised. With the weapon in hand, the girl positions herself to begin the spell on the fallen recruit. A purple aura surrounds her as strange words come from her mouth. Next, a huge magic circle forms on the ground with the power of the incantation. The spell then hits Narts head-on, and the young man begins to writhe in pain. The dark creature that was attached to him starts to break apart bit by bit. Swan finishes the spell, and the parasite completely disintegrates in the air. The last fragments of the shadow vanish, and everyone falls silent. Gate, Uldring, and Morris are open-mouthed, unable to believe what they just saw. Slowly, Narts wakes up, looking much better and a little confused by everything. The girl looks tired but maintains her composure after using so much power. Uldring then looks at our protagonist and admits that the recruit is quite useful. The scene then shifts to a dark night over the walls of a distant fort. Suddenly, we see a nightmare with a giant demon and Swan trapped among skulls. During the night, a carriage arrives at the fort, bringing the military police. Inside a tent, Scully informs our hero that the police have arrived for the case. She asks what's going to happen to Narts, and Gate says they'll sort it out soon. The archer is still shocked by the arrogance of the kid who thought he was a transcendent. Suddenly, little Morris runs into the tent, calling for our protagonist. With a panicked look, he announces that they've both been summoned to the officer's room. Our hero then wonders why he and the gnome were called in there together. The scene then shifts to the officer's room, where the tense meeting will take place. Inside, our protagonist and Morris wait with sour expressions for the conversation. The mood is very heavy, with Narts in bed surrounded by very important people. An officer begins to defend Narts, saying he's a model soldier who was just confused, and that this confusion created a crisis of inferiority for the troops' transcendence. Furthermore, he accuses our hero of ordering the act out of jealousy for the recruit's position. Our protagonist is furious with the lie and asks what kind of joke this is. Pretending to be sad, the officer says that it's all his fault for being their senior. Next, a man with rings says he will discipline the two soldiers for the incident. And this man is Jaga, the knight who hates our protagonist and little Morris. The officer turns his back and says he feels devastated by the whole situation. Jaga then reaffirms that the two soldiers will be punished very severely soon. Our protagonist seethes with anger, thinking that this guy is a garbage human being. Little Morris panics and denies the accusation with all his might. Suddenly, a giant named Moai yells for the gnome to shut up immediately. Then, a woman approaches and says she is very disappointed in both of them. She is Rebecca, the company commander, and she looks very let down by the situation. The commander then tells them to admit their mistake and reflect on their actions. Our hero cuts Morris off and says he's still adjusting to the unit. Gate takes all the blame and confesses that he was the one who gave the order to the recruit. Rebecca praises our protagonist's attitude and scolds Morris for not confessing. However, the police officer says that even with a confession, the case cannot be ignored. The commander then asks to be excused and approaches the officers for a private chat. She reminds the officer that the two are transcendents, and that changes the whole situation. Rebecca threatens him, asking what his rank is and if he wants to die right there. Right after, she says she's just kidding, and that the higher-ups don't want any trouble. The commander then tells him to leave the punishment to them and just report the details. With the police gone, Moai says that everything was resolved thanks to Rebecca's intervention. But the commander seems very angry about something and glares off to the side. She tells Moai to see her later, and the giant agrees, terrified of the woman. Jaga then appears with a smile and says the two were very lucky this time. He hands them a paper with the punishment, 7 days of running and 10 laps around the courtyard. Morris is desperate, but our hero says this is normal and tells him to get used to it. The scene shifts to the recruits' training, with the distribution of magical equipment. Next, they crawl under barbed wire and march in formation in the middle of the rain. And to finish the training, they fire blasts of magic at distant targets on the field. 5 weeks pass, and we see recruit Swan carefully cleaning her boots. A colleague compliments the shine on her boot and asks her to clean his too, but she refuses. 2 recruits comment on the assignment interview that only the best will get to do. The girl thinks that she's adapted to everything in the army, but there's something that really bothers her. And that something is Nartz, who is lying in bed, drooling and snoring loudly. Swan regrets saving his life and thinks she should have just let him bite the dust. Suddenly, an officer arrives and announces that the midterm evaluations are on the board. All the recruits rush to see the results, and Swan is shocked by what she sees. She can't believe that Nartz is in 3rd place with such high scores, and wonders what he did. Next to the board, Nartz compliments an officer's armor, who thanks him for the praise. Swan realizes that the officer is obviously sucking up to the spoiled recruit. She wonders if he's trying to turn Nartz into a transcendent. No matter what, the scene then shifts to the regular soldiers' barracks in another part of the fort. Our hero is furious about Nartz's score, and Morris explains why. It turns out that Jaga gave him the highest scores in every possible category. Gate says the scores don't matter, but Morris explains that in the Central Brigade they do. The gnome wonders if Oldring will just stand by and watch Nartz become his assistant. Morris asks if our hero isn't angry, and he says he expects nothing from humans. The gnome is impressed by our protagonist's calmness and disgusted with Jaga. Back with the recruits, Nartz complains of thirst and asks for some holy water to drink. An officer then yells and asks who's on water duty, and Swan and Xenia report. He orders the 2 to fetch water, and they leave to carry out the superior's order. The 2 carry a heavy pot, and Swan complains that they should make the giants do this. The girl then sits down to rest, and Xenia offers to switch places with her. Suddenly, Swan notices some portraits on the wall and asks what those paintings are. Xenia explains that they are portraits of war heroes from each of the battlefronts. Swan mocks one of the portraits, saying the dark elf is the ugliest of them all. She says he's so ugly he could scare away demons with just his face. Zanyo then reveals that the dark elf in the portrait is actually her father. The girl is in shock and awkwardly tries to fix the situation by complimenting the guy. She thinks that besides Nartz, now she has to deal with a guy who's a hero's son. Swan then asks why he's here, and Xenia says it's to serve his country. She wonders what he's thinking and if he sees her as some poor wretch. The scene then shifts to Xenia, thinking about which part of a mug is the safest. While they fill the pot with water, the 2 talk about their future assignments. Swan says she'll try for the extraction, and if she fails, she'll stay in the Central Brigade. And Xenia says that Nartz was called in first for the consultation because of some issue. Scully is outraged by the situation, but the officer says the decision is final. Morris then wonders if Nartz is some kind of masochist who enjoys suffering. The spoiled recruit confirms his decision, and Jaga is already thinking about the benefits he'll get. Nartz then says he will remain in the Central Brigade, to everyone's surprise, and he even applies for the position of knight, imagining himself in armor. Everyone is in shock at Nartz's decision and doesn't understand the situation at all. Jaga turns pale and can't believe what he just heard from the young man. The knight starts to sweat and wonders what kind of madness he just heard. Suddenly, Moai congratulates Narts on his choice and says it was a courageous decision. He even comforts him, saying that aptitude and species are very different things. Klaus Morris then approaches our protagonist and asks what is going on. Our hero gives a very mysterious smile, leaving the little gnome even more confused. Later, the two are walking carrying backpacks, and Morris asks what it all means. Our protagonist simply replies that he'll find out soon enough what's happening. He thinks that Jaga contacted Narts' parents and received a bribe for it. And since Narts bragged to all the officers, he couldn't back out now. Our hero explains that the kid is desperate for attention and dreamed of being a transcendent. And with that dream shattered, he now has only one option left to follow. He's going to seek out the only person who gave him attention this entire time in the army, the officer who supported him from the beginning and gave him the best scores on the evaluation. Our hero explains that all it takes is a little push for everything to change. Morris then remembers what Geit said during the run about the knight's uniform, and the plan was simply to get rid of the unit's torture officer once and for all. In other words, our protagonist set a perfect trap for Jaga to fall into. He called the plan Project Jaga's Contradiction and executed it masterfully. The scene then returns to Uldring, analyzing Narts' papers in the officer's tent. He's shocked to see that the kid is an honor student and can't believe it. Suddenly, Jaga appears with a smile, and Uldring starts connecting the dots. A puzzle forms, and he understands the knight's plan to get ahead. Jaga would get a bribe from Narts' parents, and Uldring would have to put up with the spoiled kid. The dark elf realizes he's screwed and tries to argue with Jaga about the decision, but the knight just scoffs at him and asks if he can't even train his own assistant. Uldring is furious and wonders if he'll have to endure this humiliation in silence. Back in the present, Narts makes his surprising announcement to everyone present. He says he will remain in the brigade and apply for the position of knight. Jaga turns pale, while Uldring lets out a loud laugh of pure satisfaction. The giant Mawai finds the kid's choice very unusual, but approves it on the spot. Anhydring seizes the opportunity and says that Jaga treated Narts without prejudice and with care, and that he passionately advocated for an end to the role barriers between species. Therefore, Uldring suggests that the higher-ups recognize Jaga's sincerity and laughed. Mawai says that in the end, sincerity always wins, and Jaga tries to argue against the decision. Uldring then provokes him, asking if someone received a bribe or forged the scores. He even tells the knight to accept the result and obey the chain of command. Jaga is furious but can't say anything in front of the officers and Narts. Besides, he never imagined that the true mastermind behind it all was our hero. Our protagonist thinks that it's not over yet, and that there's one last move to make. Seeing the whole scene, Morris becomes convinced that the real demon here is Geit. The scene then shifts to a dark forest, with a strange animal watching something. A troop of soldiers marches in tight formation, following the commander's orders. And among them is Xenia, who finds a strange little rock on the forest floor. She picks up the object and keeps it as a souvenir while Swan watches from a distance. The recruits continue their long night march, carrying heavy backpacks and equipment. Our hero encourages them to keep going, saying there's only one more hill to go. Swan feels exhausted and focuses only on putting one foot in front of the other, so she doesn't give up. The commander then orders everyone to sing a marching song to lift their spirits. Finally, the recruits arrive back at the fort and celebrate the end of their training. With that, the 6 weeks of basic training in the enlistment unit come to an end. And now, the long-awaited Deca weapon extraction ceremony is finally about to begin. An officer announces the start of the third extraction ceremony, and everyone salutes the flag. Morris wonders why it's the third time, and our hero says there have been over 100. Our hero explains to Morris that if the prophecy is right, it all ends in the 10th round. An officer with wings then begins the ceremony. Speaking of their noble tradition, she announces that the recruits from the Black Magic unit will begin the final extraction. Geit yells for the rookies to step forward and says the class has 2 candidates. He then calls Recruit 29, Xenia, and Recruit 7, Swan, for the test. The two warm up for the challenge, and a purple magic aura surrounds their bodies. The officer announces that Xenia, the second in the class, will be the first to attempt the extraction. Xenia then informs Swan that she will be the one chosen to become the new Transcendent. The Deca weapon is legendary and cannot be pulled by normal means, but Xenia has a plan, because she believes her absurd muscle strength is more than enough for the task. Scully is shocked by the girl's muscles, and Gate says she's going to use brute force. Swan then realizes that Xenia's family genetics are the reason for her incredible strength. The recruit gets into a powerlifting stance to pull the weapon. With a deafening shout for her father, Xenia puts all of her strength into the movement. However, despite all her effort, the Deca weapon simply doesn't move. Frustrated, she asks if anyone has a shovel, and Gate tells the girl to get down from there. Next up is Swan, recruit number 7, who walks up to the weapon. The other recruits comment that she is the top student of their entire class. The officer then recites the words from the scripture about the worthy and transcendence. And with a final shout of extract, Swan prepares to try her luck. With her hands on the staff, Swan prepares to try her luck with all her might. Our hero and little Morris watch the scene with great anticipation in the air. The girl takes a deep breath and focuses on pulling the weapon with everything she's got. She then uses all her energy, but the staff doesn't move a single millimeter. Swan is shocked and wonders why the weapon isn't moving at all. The other recruits comment that neither Xenia nor she could do it, and that the scripture was wrong. With a tearful expression, the girl thinks that she was so sure and wonders if she miscalculated. A memory of her past at the bar comes back, and she thinks she's not so smart anymore. She then decides to give up, but her hands simply won't let go of the staff. The girl becomes desperate and wonders why her hand won't release the weapon. Suddenly, a dark red energy explodes from the staff with immense force. Swan is terrified and has no idea what is happening around her. The other recruits get scared and wonder why she's just standing there. Our protagonist and Morris realize that something very serious is about to happen. And from the middle of the red smoke, a shadowy creature emerges, the Lord of Gyokun. The creature then calls Swan weak and says she's too boring for him. And unlike the weapon's previous owner, she has no ambition in life. The Lord then reveals that she spends her nights reading silly princess romance novels, and that on weekends she gets wasted and gets shot down by every guy. Swan yells that's in the past, and the Lord says that's why she always fails. The Lord then says he prefers her to Nartz and Xenia, and grants her the weapon Jet Black Dew. Swan has a bored expression, not really caring about what just happened. The creature explains that the weapon is corrupt, but because she's lazy, she can be trusted. The Lord then announces that from now on, the Deca weapon belongs to her by right. She thinks it's nice that the Lord trusts her, but her favorite book is not a silly romance. Suddenly, the girl gets angry and yells that her book is actual literature. Everyone present is shocked and has no idea what she's talking about. Swan then snaps back to reality, very confused by her own over-the-top reaction. The other recruits awkwardly start applauding the troop's new transcendent. Ironically, the girl just stands there with the staff in her hand, not understanding how she did it. Due to her humble personality, she obtained the weapon and became a transcendent black mage. However, the first female transcendent ended up bothering some of the army's female veterans. They complain that the girl will get triple the pay and that she'll be cursed for it. But Xenia celebrates and says that if it's Swan, she approves of the Deca weapon's choice. The scene then shifts to total darkness, with a very faint glow on the horizon. Suddenly, Xenia is startled by something she felt from very far away. She looks at a distant mountain and sees a very strange light on its peak. The recruit says she felt a very sinister aura, and her eye begins to glow brightly. The energy on the mountain grows more and more intense, and a dark power spreads, and in the middle of it all, the image of terrifying demons emerges in the darkness of the night. The recruit's completion ceremony finally takes place under a very cloudy and gloomy sky. Swan reflects that finishing the training is satisfying, but she also feels empty because it's just the beginning. Unexpectedly, Xenia appears behind the girl and calls out to her, giving her a good scare. The new transcendent gets startled, and her colleague explains she didn't say anything so as not to spoil the mood. Then, the muscular recruit reveals she saw demons gathering on one of the mountain peaks. The girl then hands a strange object to Swan and asks her to take it to our hero. The item looks like a spiky ball, and Xenia warns that it's a bad omen. The elf is confused, wondering if it's a rubber ball, but agrees to deliver it. Suddenly, The muscular recruit opens her arms dramatically, leaving the other girl completely clueless. Then, Xenia gives the new transcendent a big hug, thanking her for the last 6 weeks together. The girl responds a bit awkwardly as the other says goodbye, waving from a distance. In the background, 2 other recruits who fought at the beginning are hugging and crying as they say goodbye. The carts start to leave, and the new transcendent, losing her patience, tells the others to be quiet. Next to Gate and Morris, the girl thinks that they'll never see each other again anyway. Our protagonist complains that the newbies are already thinking about vacation, and Scully agrees with him. Little Morris mentions that he joined after that, and even got to enjoy civilian food for a few days. Gate gets annoyed with the dwarf and scolds him, saying he has no sense at all. Elsewhere, the new transcendent puts a new armband on her official uniform. She's adjusting her new outfit, which, besides being stiff, feels very tight in the chest area. With her staff in hand, the girl says that she and her weapon will be together until the end. In her new uniform, Swan leaves the tent, and little Morris is waiting for her outside. The dwarf then hands an old book with strange runes on the cover to the new transcendent. He explains that the notebook contains the order of the veterans, cleaning duties, and the format for reports. Additionally, Morris warns her that the passwords change every day, and that a veteran named Jera is very strict. The dwarf then leaves her alone to memorize everything, and warns her to never let go of her weapon, Deca. With a focused look, the girl stares at the book confidently, as memorizing is her specialty. While studying, the elf hears a strange noise coming from somewhere nearby and gets curious. The sound was coming from our hero, who was training with his sword, starting with 1 repetition. Then, he performs a powerful strike called Stone Splitter Cut, a sword technique that splits rocks. From the tent, the girl watches the training and wonders if that brute force technique works in combat. Suddenly, the new transcendent remembers the strange object Xenia asked her to deliver. The scene cuts to Uldring reading a book and letting out an evil laugh, looking very pleased. The dark elf walks along happily, thinking about what he'll teach the rookie first, since she's smart. Passing by another tent, he yells at someone, telling them to at least take the dirty clothes out of the locker. He continues on his way, humming happily about having found the new assistant. With a serious expression, the dark elf gets the attention of 2 people who are nearby. Right ahead were 2 veterans who are about to be promoted to officers. One of them is Jera, a high-level healer elf known as the Serpent Eyes of the West. The other is Azin, a high-level giant tank nicknamed the Muscle Brain of the South. The dark elf, who was a demon to the newbies, now looks like a simple recruit in front of them. The veteran Jera asks the dark elf why he's smiling so much. Azin pressures him, complaining that a rookie got an assistant before they did. With a smile, Jera tells the dark elf to bring the assistant to the recreation room. The dark elf grumbles that the new transcendent is still in her protection period. The healer overhears the comment and becomes furious with the dark elf's audacity. Then the giant hits him hard, asking if he's challenging her. Intimidated, the instructor falls to the ground and agrees to bring the girl immediately. He walks away feeling miserable as he heads toward the rookie's tent. Inside the tent, Swan is sitting on her bed, waiting for her next orders. The dark elf enters and calls her outside, praising the girl's good posture. Outside, he's smoking and asks her if she uses a certain type of herb, and she says no. The instructor seriously warns her to never do something like that. The girl looks at him with a serious gaze and firmly replies that she won't. She asks if he isn't a veteran too, and he explains that the hierarchy is strict. He warns her that he can protect her from many things, but not from the veterans. The dark elf advises her to keep a low profile and get used to the situation. Elsewhere, our protagonist is examining some important documents. He finds the report on the strange object the girl received from Xenia. The paper identifies it as an unusual demon eye found in the 9th region. He remembers the girl saying that Xenia found it and becomes tense with the information. Before the demon eye turned completely purple, an attack team had invaded enemy territory. The problem is that the purple color means the demon has finished scouting and evolved to invade. With this, our hero realizes the situation is desperate and that they are in deep trouble. Little Morris sees his friend's expression, and he just tells the dwarf to prepare for combat immediately. Then the gnome explains that the officer on duty has disappeared and is probably sleeping in the barracks. Furious, the protagonist runs off, muttering about the officer, while his friend asks where he's going. He knows that without an officer on duty, and with the veterans on leave, the situation has gotten even worse. Then he remembers that the next in the line of command are the two veterans Uldring met. In the recreation room, the healer Jera is already staring at the rookie with a very intimidating smile. The new transcendent is visibly nervous, unsure of what to do in front of the two of them. She remembers a note that said the two of them are always together and are very dangerous. The veteran then questions how the girl knows so much, since she was just transferred. The rookie is in complete shock, having no idea how to answer her question. To get out of the tight spot, the elf stands at attention and introduces herself formally. Then the healer asks for the password of the day, and the girl answers everything correctly, improvising at the end. Beside them, the giant Aeson watches the whole scene in silence with a very serious and judgmental look. Suddenly, the giant strikes the rookie's head with her metal gauntlet without any warning. Aeson warns that rookies can't wear short skirts, while the other veteran watches with a smile. The healer then attacks her with a kick, wondering if she needs to spell it out for her. With the girl's head lowered, the veteran questions how she even got into the army. The veteran continues to belittle the rookie and harshly criticizes her clothes. Unexpectedly, our hero bursts just in time to interrupt the scene. He then shouts desperately, showing the demon eye to the two veterans. But the healer ignores him and says the object will turn purple, and it will be too late. With that, the giant lands a powerful punch on the protagonist, sending him flying. Jera then tells her colleague to stop, as the situation seems to be very serious. The young man holds the demon eye, which is now almost completely purple, and looks worried. The two veterans exchange looks with mischievous smiles, unconcerned by the warning. They pretend not to understand and continue to mock the young man's concern. Our hero gets annoyed and questions their attitude, but the healer just taunts him more. The elf ignores the situation and accuses the young man of doing it all to impress the rookie. Then the giant lands a powerful kick on the protagonist, throwing him out of the place. The young man flies a long way and lands hard on the ground outside the fort. The giant belittles him, telling him to go clean the trash like he's just some recruit. Kneeling on the ground, the swordsman reflects on the attitude of all the superiors. In his bed, he thinks that everyone there is crazy for ignoring such a clear warning. He stares at the demon eye and realizes that time is running out quickly. The next morning, in a watchtower, a soldier complains about being bored 40 minutes before the shift change. A soldier approaches little Morris, who is on guard duty, and asks him to tell a story. Suddenly, the soldier gets terrified and points to something awful behind the little dwarf. Little Morris then bursts out laughing and says the soldier's acting was terrible, but the joke ends when a giant demon appears behind them, sending the soldier into a panic. The scene focuses on the demon eye, which is now completely purple, indicating the imminent danger. It's revealed that the previous scene was a joke, and Morris makes fun of his colleague's bad acting. The soldier is shocked by the monster's appearance, while the little dwarf keeps laughing. It's explained that the world is in an unstable ceasefire after a century of war against the demons. Over time, the stains on the battlefields began to slowly fade away. The swords that once fought were now silent and forgotten amidst the vegetation. But the Federation forgot its oath, and the soldiers only cared about relaxing in the barracks. This led to a wave of desertions and absences, with officers and soldiers abandoning their posts. No one noticed until the last line of defense was breached by a creature called a Wurgle. With the title card of the series, the tension for what's to come only grows. Immediately, a soldier sounds the warning horn to alert everyone of the imminent invasion. The sound echoes through the fort, and a soldier's desperate shout announces that a demon has arrived. The soldiers on the wall are in shock, wondering how the creature got past the barrier. The giant demon then appears on top of the wall, staring at the soldiers with a menacing look. Fear is so great that one of the soldiers feels sick to his stomach upon seeing a demon for the first time. Because it's a low-class but high-level demon, the pressure it emits is overwhelming. Most of the soldiers can't handle the despair and pressure, feeling nauseous. To make matters worse, its aura and thirst for battle were even stronger, and it moves into attack. One of the soldiers is completely terrified by the creature's imminent attack. He tries to defend himself, but the monster's blow is too strong and hits him squarely. The battle descends into chaos, with the creature attacking and knocking down several soldiers. Another soldier faces the demon up close and is frozen with fear, asking it not to come any closer. The creature ignores the plea and approaches the young man on the ground, who can only groan in pain. Suddenly, our hero appears with an expression of pure fury and determination on his face. He then leaps toward the monster with the full moon in the background, preparing to attack. His eyes glow with a yellow intensity, showing that he's not messing around. With his weapon, Deka, he unleashes a powerful and precise strike toward the creature. The blow lands squarely on the monster, and it lets out a cry of pain, feeling the impact of the attack. The creature roars in fury, its face wounded by the swordsman's accurate cut. The protagonist lands in a combat stance as the demon stumbles from the blow. With his breath ragged, he realizes this isn't an illusion but a harsh reality. The situation is real, and the wounded monster still faces our hero, ready to continue the fight. From the top of the wall, the new transcendent Swan is in shock at seeing a real demon. Meanwhile, the archer Scully and her squad get into position to provide support with their arrows. The scene shows the soldiers surrounding the creature in the courtyard, preparing for a team battle. A young elf soldier is completely terrified by the scene and can barely move. Swan is also scared and sweating, wondering what on earth that thing is. Suddenly, she feels a strange sensation, and her body trembles before the creature. The dark elf approaches the new transcendent and asks why she's shaking so much. Meanwhile, our hero notices that besides Oldring, there are no other veterans or officers around. The instructor wonders where the other cowards have hidden since the warning horn sounded. Then he scolds a soldier, telling him to stop coughing and put on his protective scarf. The wounded monster gets to its feet, and a strange liquid starts to drip from its tail. Our protagonist recognizes the substance and realizes it's a demon swamp. It's explained that the reason Wurgles are so dangerous isn't just because of their aggression. The real danger is a mucus that comes from their bodies, which is called the swamp. This liquid spreads across the ground and begins to solidify rapidly in the courtyard. With that, the ground becomes contaminated and instantly transforms into demonic territory. Seeing the girl frozen, Oldring yells at her to snap out of her trance and start using magic. He shakes her forcefully, trying to pull her out of her shock, so she can help in the battle. Suddenly, a knight appears, wondering if it's his turn to jump into action. And this knight is Jaga, who shows up mounted on a horse, with a very strange look on his face. The archer Scully gets annoyed, and yells at him to get out of the way and not block her view. He tries to attack the monster, but is hit and thrown far away with no chance to react. Amidst the focused fire, the new mage is completely disappointed with her own behavior. She sees the fallen knight and thinks that even that idiot had the courage to fight. The girl continues to tremble, unable to move, and questions what kind of transcendent she is. The scene shows our hero and the others preparing to face the creature again. Our hero explains that if the monster's body is taken down before the mucus hardens, the swamp disappears. He remembers that the creature has already been analyzed, so there's a strategy for the battle. The Wurgle hasn't fully developed yet, so its skin is still very soft. Because of this, he moves forward, aiming specifically at the membranes of the monster's joints. He then focuses on the joint around its neck, as that is the creature's vital point. Then the swordsman unleashes a powerful strike, planning to cut the weak spot in one go. The attack hits the monster, leaving some cuts, but the creature remains standing despite its injuries. The protagonist is in shock because his attack was blocked, and he doesn't understand why. The creature used its arm to defend itself, and the force of the impact throws him backward. He loses his balance and falls, completely confused by the monster's unexpected defense. The young man realizes this defense wasn't due to intelligence, and that the situation is much more complicated. He understands that protecting its neck is a primitive instinct, and remembers a deserter. Despite the failure, he doesn't give up and prepares to attack again with his sword. Suddenly, tentacles of dark magic appear and bind the creature, immobilizing its movements. The dark elf then taunts the monster, saying it's just big and a useless piece of junk. Seeing the chance, the other soldiers shout for Uldring, asking for tactical orders for the attack. The archer Scully also joins the chorus and desperately shouts for attack orders. Only then does the dark elf realize he is the highest-ranking person and the commander. Under pressure, he panics and yells for Morris to use buffs, and for everyone to attack with everything they've got. The little dwarf obeys and casts a protective light magic in an area to strengthen the soldiers. With the commander's order, the archer Scully and her squad fire a shower of arrows. The projectiles hit the monster squarely, which was already trapped by the instructor's dark magic. The dark elf then seizes the opportunity and casts an even more powerful spell. With this, the magic of eternal sleep binds the creature with strong, shadowy chains. Even so, the monster struggles with all its might, trying to break free from the chains. The instructor panics because the spell is breaking apart too quickly for his liking. Desperate, he yells for our hero to do something while the young man concentrates. The swordsman then grips his weapon firmly and waits for the perfect moment to strike. But the dark elf has no patience and yells at him to attack before the creature escapes. The magic chains begin to break, and the monster is one step away from freeing itself. The commander keeps shouting, but our hero focuses entirely on his target, ignoring everything else. With a deafening roar, the creature finally shatters the chains and breaks free. At that exact moment, the protagonist sees the perfect opportunity and shouts that now is the time. He charges forward with all his might and prepares to deliver a finishing blow with his sword. Deca. With a look of pure fury, the young man swears he will end this threat once and for all. In the background, two other soldiers watch the scene, completely shocked by his courage. Our hero's strike leaves a trail of destruction in its path across the courtyard, and with a single precise attack, the monster's head is severed and flies through the air. The archer Scully and her companions are left with their mouths wide open, unable to believe the scene. The dark elf, the new mage, and the young soldier are also frozen and impressed. With a single blow, the creature's head is sent flying through the air under the light of the full moon. Then we see the Federation's swordsman, panting and exhausted after the intense battle. The monster that infiltrated the unit has finally been successfully eliminated by our hero. But all that effort came at a price, and the young man collapses to the ground, completely drained. Far away on a mountain, a dark and sinister energy begins to manifest. A giant eye then opens, revealing the presence of an even more powerful creature. The new demon lets out a deafening roar that echoes throughout the entire surrounding region. With its cry, a horde of smaller, bizarre demons emerges from the shadows in obedience. It is revealed that this creature is a Grotna white-bodied, higher-level demon. A screen explains that the Wurgle's mucus creates a swamp that helps demons breathe. Furthermore, the solidified goo becomes a base of movement for low-class monsters. Elsewhere, our hero runs to the Federation's command and control headquarters. Inside, a woman with wings is at her desk and seems to notice something strange happening. She then picks up a message that arrived the previous day, wondering what it is. The letter was sent by our hero, warning about the invasion and the absence of the officers. The winged woman is shocked as she holds the evidence he sent, the demon eye. The scene then cuts to the conference room of the Federation headquarters officers. The winged woman bursts into the room, desperate to warn everyone about the emergency situation. But she stops suddenly when she sees the officers looking intently at a crystal ball. Captain Rebecca and the others welcome her, saying she arrived at a good time for the meeting. The winged woman becomes tense and explains that there is an irregular signal coming from the scrying orb. She says they hadn't received an image for a long time and thought the crystal tower was broken. Captain Rebecca analyzes the letter and realizes the young man predicted the demonic infiltration yesterday. One of the officers doubts the information and questions if the demon bestiary has any real basis. But the image from the orb confirms everything and shows that the transcendents have proven their usefulness. A more serious officer says that with the border destroyed, there's no time to waste, and they must advance. However, another, older officer reminds everyone that they are in a ceasefire period. The younger one gets angry and shouts that demons are not people, but vermin that need to be exterminated. He continues his lecture, questioning how the other can say that with the defense lines breached. A third officer points to the map and comments on the Groton's bloodlands. He explains that this is the region farthest from the main demon territory in the area. He then suggests sending only the 3 transcendents on an infiltration mission instead of the whole army. The man turns to the meeting leader and asks for Captain Rebecca's opinion on the plan. The winged woman is then asked what decision she will make regarding the situation. On the wall, the little dwarf asks his friend if he won't be punished for breaking the chain of command. The young man replies that it's an emergency, and he no longer trusts his superiors as the swamp spreads. Our hero observes the goo and understands that the Wurgle only moved so much because of another swamp. With a determined look, he knows it's only a matter of time before other demons appear. He concludes that they need to invade the Bloodlands and take down the white-bodied host. The swordsman then realizes the bestiary was right and needs to be read more carefully. Little Morris then asks his friend what will happen now that the battle is over. Our hero replies firmly that they are going to march, leaving the dwarf completely shocked. Facing the sunrise, the swordsman concludes that the ceasefire is over and the time to fight has come. The bestiary reinforces the idea that history has always been about taking down others or being taken down, with no other option. On the wall, the night Jaga appears, wondering what on earth happened all night. He gets annoyed and questions why the monster was quiet, and then suddenly attacked with full force. With contempt, he tells a wounded soldier to be quiet, but then immediately asks for him to be carried away. Meanwhile, the veterans are smoking and mocking the newbies who fought the demon. The new transcendent observes the scene from a distance and finds the whole situation very depressing. An older officer arrives, shouting furiously that the reporting system is a mess. He then curses at the group and orders everyone who made the mess to clean up the filth and stains. Suddenly, rain begins to fall, and a strange feeling hangs in the air, making everyone tense. Our protagonist feels a weird discomfort and tries to understand the reason for that feeling. The crystal transmission tower is shown under the heavy rain, looking very mysterious. Someone writes a false report, crediting the victory to Sergeant Moe with 0 casualties. The sergeant then relaxes in his chair, happy that Rebecca isn't around to bother him. With a dark look, our hero wonders if this whole situation is actually real. The new mage stares at the group with a serious expression and questions their actions. Next, we see the young man and the elf standing, while the 2 officers are tied up on the floor. The girl complains about the smell of the dirty laundry and says they should have collected it before the rain. With a kick, the new mage demands an answer, and the tied-up soldier desperately apologizes. She then belittles the other officer, questioning her about not having prepared hot water for their baths. Our hero tries to intervene, explaining to the veteran Jera that the previous night was an emergency, but the giant angrily interrupts him, accusing him of getting arrogant for taking down one demon. She warns him that washing laundry and fetching hot water is more important than anything else there. Beside them, the healer smiles mockingly and comments that she needs to teach them the basics again. The swordsman finally understands the reason for his discomfort with the whole situation. The fact that there were no casualties made everyone forget how serious the situation really was. Angrily, he thinks that maybe someone should have been lost for them to understand. The giant notices that the young man is no longer hiding his anger and glares at him with a deathly look. Suddenly, a soldier shouts that the officer wants everyone assembled on the parade ground immediately. The big woman then complains about the rain, and the healer wonders if they'll go back to the same spot. The scene cuts to the wounded soldiers being helped, and our hero is very frustrated with everything. On the parade ground, Sergeant Moe announces that he will skip the report and go straight to the final decision. It is explained that only transcendents can enter the bloodlands where the host lives. Their Deca weapon has a function that makes it easier for transcendents to breathe in swamp zones. The sergeant shouts that the transcendent troops will go first as the mission's advance team. He orders that after they take down the host, they must signal for the rest of the forces to advance. The protagonist then says that with so many demons in the way, this order is basically a suicide mission. The sergeant becomes furious and questions him for talking back to a superior's order like that. The new mage observes the young man and thinks that he ignores the pressure and points out what is wrong. Our hero then insists that there is no time and that they need an immediate advance order, but Sergeant Moe ignores the warning, talking about soldierly spirit and that he believes in the three of them. He then sends them to clean up the area and prepare for the mission at dawn the next day. With the assembly dismissed, the swordsman is furious with the absurd order and the lack of awareness. It is revealed that fully evolved Wurgles will cross the border later today, making everything worse. The young man realizes that every second counts when a mysterious feather falls right in front of him. The feather then lands gently on his chest, leaving the protagonist very confused by the scene. He then looks up and sees something flying at high speed across the rainy sky. Suddenly, Captain Rebecca lands in the middle of the courtyard, surprising everyone present. She goes straight to the swordsman and grabs him by his clothes with a very serious look on her face. The young man recognizes her immediately, as she is the captain who was at the command headquarters. Right after, the captain's elite squad also lands in the courtyard, ready for action. Sergeant Moe is completely shocked and asks how she managed to get back so quickly. Rebecca then shows him the false report and asks if he was the one who wrote it. Desperate, the sergeant tries to explain himself, but the captain doesn't seem willing to listen. Without patience, she grabs him by the neck with her clawed hand and lifts him off the ground. The winged woman then hits him with a powerful kick, making him groan in pain from the impact. She crumples the false report and accuses him of writing a novel instead of a document. The captain questions if he thought the transmission tower was just there for decoration. The captain continues her lecture, saying she doesn't even need reports to know what happened. Looking at the protagonist's group, she knows it's obvious what really went on there. In that moment, she realizes who was putting in the effort and who was just relaxing and doing nothing. With the false report in her hand, the winged woman tears it up with all her strength in front of everyone. She then spreads her wings and shouts for all personnel to pay close attention to her. Starting today from this very hour, things are going to change drastically for everyone there. The commander announces that she has received an emergency order from headquarters and that this is not a drill. She orders all personnel in the unit to prepare themselves with full combat gear. With that, the captain declares that all of them are finally going to march together to war. The new transcendent mage feels an overwhelming pressure and can barely stand. Even little Morris is completely terrified by the creature's sinister presence. But our hero tries to pull himself together and stay focused, knowing he can't waver now. He understands that if he loses concentration, everyone there will fall to that giant demon. At that moment, the creature shows its immense power, making the pressure in the area even greater. Then, the monster charges full speed towards the swordsman to start the fight. With that, the creature's aura makes the protagonist and his companions feel very nauseous. The girl then falls to the ground, regretting that she became a transcendent. It's explained that their fear is an instinctive surrender ingrained since the beginning of time. Realizing the situation, the swordsman yells for his friends to snap out of that trance immediately. However, the monster doesn't waste any time and attacks with a powerful blow towards the group. The impact of the attack shatters the stone floor and kicks up a huge cloud of dust. But our hero was fast and managed to save his two companions at the last second. He then wonders how he's going to fight that monster with only rookies by his side. Then, the young man remembers the sergeant's order that sent the three of them on this dangerous mission. With a furious look, he thinks that his superiors are a bunch of complete fools. He then gets up and decides to stop thinking, focusing only on defeating the creature. The young man convinces himself that at the end of the day, the monster's attack patterns aren't so different. So he prepares to hold his ground and get within the enemy's range to be able to attack. With that, the swordsman advances closer to the demon and aims for its vital points. The monster attacks with incredible speed, and the swordsman tries to defend against the blow, but he realizes his attack had no effect on the creature in front of him. With that, the demon attacks with a powerful strike, sending the young man flying. The protagonist flies through the air and hits the ground hard, getting badly hurt from the impact. He thinks his attack was perfect, but even so, he couldn't cut through the monster's skin. Down and injured, the young man wonders how he's going to defeat that thing. Then he remembers a deserting soldier and his sword with a strange design. The scene shows a dark-skinned elf showing off the weapon with a very confident smile. The soldier from the past says that a friend named Leo drew that on the sword for him. Back in the present, our hero is shocked as he understands the whole situation. He realizes that soldier didn't desert like everyone at the fort thought. The young man understands that the deserter was defeated, and the monster absorbed his strength. The deserter's sword is shown shattering tough defenses with ease in a vision. It's revealed that for a demon used to battles, and even worse things, the squad of Transcendents with zero combat experience is quite weak. The creature was just using them to relieve its long-held boredom. Then, the monster forms a large rock in its hand and prepares to attack again. Then it hurls a shower of sharp rocks toward the group of heroes. The new mage and the small dwarf are hit and thrown far away by the impact. With that, the two of them fall to the ground, seriously injured and unable to move. The monster watches the swordsman, who struggles to get up from the ground. Without wasting time, the creature charges full speed towards the fallen young man. It continues its powerful charge with the goal of taking out the protagonist. The two rookies watch in despair, and the elf girl laments the situation, but the new mage decides to act and begins to cast a dark magic spell. With that, the spell, Throne of Eternal Sleep, traps the creature with shadow chains. It's explained that just like archery, magic also requires a high level of concentration. Because of this, a spell cast while paralyzed by fear simply can't work properly, and the demon breaks the chains with ease. The creature then lets out a furious roar and glares at the two mages from a distance. The small dwarf looks at the scene and realizes this is an opponent they cannot defeat. The elf girl also comes to the same conclusion and is completely devastated by the situation. Seeing its chance, the monster charges full speed towards the two rookies on the battlefield. But our hero appears and manages to block the creature's attack with his sword. The young man thinks that he tried to cut the monster, but its skin is so tough he can only defend. The creature gives no rest and prepares an attack from above to crush the swordsman. The demon then attacks with a powerful punch that opens a crater in the stone floor. With the force of the impact, the protagonist is thrown back once again with no chance to react. On the ground, he realizes the power difference and thinks that to get through that thing's neck, its weakest point and the sword's strongest point need to line up perfectly. To have even the slightest chance of victory, their strategy needs to be perfect. But right now, the group is cornered and without many attack options. So the swordsman yells at his friends, asking if they want to be defeated there. He says that if they don't help him now, the whole group will go down without a fight. And with that, the troops waiting outside will also be completely wiped out. The young man asks them to think of nothing else and focus only on defeating the monster. With a serious look, the two rookies concentrate completely on the enemy before them. The protagonist then says that the worst that can happen is they all fall in battle. Their leader's words, spoken calmly and with a tone of resignation, actually made the new mage named Swan feel much calmer. She then remembers that to restrain a demon of that level, the only option is the Kalastrutra spell, but the spell's binding force gets weaker the farther it is from the ground. So when the monster's head is close to the ground, she needs to use all her mana. The swordsman thinks that it's hard to hit a stationary target, let alone one that moves quickly. The girl stays silent for a moment, thinking of a solution to the big problem. Suddenly, the elf girl has an idea and decides to test a very risky hypothesis. She understands that if inertia increases, the momentum that needs to be controlled also increases. With this, the mage asks the dwarf to cast a buff on just one of the enemy's legs. She yells that they have no other choice and asks her friend to hurry up with the spell. Without understanding, the small mage obeys, and the creature charges forward for another powerful attack. The small dwarf then decides to trust his friend and prepares to cast the spell. With that, he uses a physical strength enhancement buff with all the energy he has left. The magic hits the creature's leg head on, making it glow with a blue aura of power. At the same time, the new mage concentrates and waits for the perfect moment to cast her spell. With its lead strengthened, the monster tries to jump but ends up losing all its balance in mid-air. The creature is completely shocked, not understanding what's happening to its body. Unable to control itself, the demon then falls headfirst onto the ground with great force. Seeing the perfect chance, the elf girl yells that now's the time and starts casting her magic. She casts the Kalastrutra spell, which traps the creature with claws of dark energy. The protagonist is surprised because the rookie's risky plan actually worked. Completely exhausted, the girl calls out to her leader as she suffers from the strain of the spell. At that moment, she remembers a night when she watched the swordsman training alone. The scene shows the young man in his basic combat stance with his sword raised high. She used to wonder if that rock smashing technique was really useful in a real fight. Back in the present, the leader understands the mage's signal and prepares to use form number 1. He then raises his giant sword, ready to deliver the final blow to the trapped creature. Meanwhile, the small dwarf spends all his remaining mana on another enhancement spell, but this time, the strength buff goes entirely to our protagonist for the final attack. Impressed, the young man says he takes back what he said about them being just useless rookies. Then, empowered, he readies his technique and calls out his friends' names for the attack. The young man says that to have even the slightest chance of victory, their strategy needs to be perfect. With that, he praises his friends and prepares his basic sword technique for the final blow. The two rookies use all the energy they have left and yell with effort from the attack. Then the swordsman brings his sword down with all his might, using the Stone Crusher Strike technique. With a single blow, the monster's head is separated from its body and flies through the air. It's explained that all demons are connected through a shared consciousness. Because of this, the subordinate units can't act without orders from the main brain. History and records prove that the demons have declared the restart of the war. Elsewhere, the demon leaders gather and say that the ceasefire was temporary. A dark elf says that if they miss this moment, they won't have another chance to attack. Meanwhile, the Federation's troops march into battle under a heavy rain. Captain Rebecca says she asked for reinforcements, but the support probably won't arrive in time. A dark elf complains that the license system is going to end as soon as it started. Two soldiers panic, and one of them says he's very nervous about the situation. Suddenly, one of the men starts coughing and wonders what's happening. A purple ink-like mist spreads through the forest and passes the Federation's zone. An officer then desperately yells for all the soldiers to put on their protective masks. Even with the masks, the men are disgusted by that strange mist in the air. A canteen falls into a purple puddle and starts to bubble, showing that the liquid is dangerous. A soldier is then attacked by a slime monster that suddenly emerges from the ground. The soldier is caught by surprise and ends up being grabbed by one of those slime creatures. Next, monsters that look like giant lizards emerge from the mist, attacking the soldiers. In desperation, the commander yells for the infantry to form a defense phalanx immediately. With that, the frontline soldiers create a barrier with their shields and get ready. but a woman with wings appears from the sky and attacks one of the creatures with her sharp sword. She flies at high speed and aims for the monster's head for a quick and precise strike. With a precise movement, the warrior manages to easily slice off the creature's nose. Then she yells to the other soldiers that if they cut off their noses, the creatures will lose their sense of direction. Following the orders, the other soldiers begin to attack the monster's noses in the battle. It's explained that these demons rely heavily on their sense of smell and get disoriented without their noses. Just when the battle seemed won, two giant monsters emerge in the middle of the battlefield. A soldier screams in fear, saying that two huge creatures appeared there out of nowhere. The commander gets worried and says they have even less time than he had imagined. With that, he orders the Hapian squad to attack the monster on the left with everything they've got. At the same time, he tells the archers to focus all their attacks on the monster on the right. The arrows hit the creature, but don't seem to cause much damage to its thick hide. Even so, the monsters feel the attacks, and the defensive line begins to break. One of the giants raises its paw with sharp claws, ready to crush the soldiers. The creature attacks with a powerful blow and destroys part of the barrier with its strength. One of the mages in the rear is hit and ends up being dragged away by the monster's attack. An earth spell creates sharp stakes that rise from the ground to impale the enemies, but the white-haired mage manages to hold back the giant monster with his bare hands. Our hero then yells that he'll take care of the creatures and tells the others to use the ink mist. With that, the elf snaps out of his trance and remembers he needs to use the mist in the holes. The mage then prepares to cast the Vincent Savant spell with all his energy. He remembers that the sergeant sent only the three transcendents to the front line. With that, the elf releases a powerful wave of purple energy that spreads across the field. The group's leader says that after learning the attack pattern, responding is very easy, because the monsters instinctively react and defend against long-range attacks. So the young man realizes he just needs to get close to land a clean hit. His plan is to get close enough to cut the creatures down with a single attack. With that, the swordsman charges forward and cuts one of the giant monsters in half with his sword. Meanwhile, the rain continues to fall heavily on the blood-soaked battlefield. The two winged warriors prepare in the air and cross their swords for a combined attack. They then dive down and cut the second giant monster with an X-shaped strike. With that, the two warriors announce that both creatures have been successfully neutralized. The group leader then informs them that the combat is over and they will now cross the black bar. But the white-haired mage feels useless and thinks he couldn't do anything in the fight. The winged commander warns that after the black bar, it's officially demon territory. The young elf remains shaken as the group cautiously advances into the blood zone. The soldiers obey their orders as they cross the dangerous, rocky enemy territory. Just then, an elf in the rear guard notices she was wounded by shrapnel from the previous battle. She then uses healing magic on herself and complains that she didn't want to get a scar. But the winged commander scolds her and tells her to focus on healing the wounded fighters. Suddenly, a warrior in heavy armor is attacked by one of those lizard creatures. Unfazed, the woman fights back and destroys the monster with a single, extremely powerful punch. She then looks back with a very annoyed expression at the failure in the defensive line. The warrior scolds a soldier for letting the creature get past him and reach her. Watching the scene, the winged commander thinks that the attack team's composition isn't bad. However, she realizes that the effects of the ink mist are lowering everyone's stats. Even though she's far from the main brain, the leader understands that victory depends on the three transcendents. At that moment, another winged warrior spots the blood zone and points the group in the right direction. But a soldier yells in desperation because a swarm of demons is attacking from the rear. The commander then orders all the blue mages to prepare the World Tree spell. With that, the mages unite and begin to cast a large area of effect defense spell. The magic creates roots of blue energy that spread across the field and protect the soldiers. Then the leader orders everyone to block the demons. Access based on the phalanx formation. The roots of the magic tree move and trap the creatures trying to advance on the troops. The commander then turns to the protagonist, and he confirms that he understood her orders. She warns him that the defense won't last long, and the young man says he is aware of the situation. The commander yells for the mages to use all their mana on heals and buffs for the Transcendents. She then asks if the three of them are ready, and they confirm with a war cry. With that, the leader tells the trio to advance, and they enter the darkness of the blood zone. The three youths' weapons glow brightly to light the way in the dark place. At that moment, the protagonist's sword activates its red cloud's breath function. The young man announces that his weapon's defense function has been activated to protect the group. He explains that the weapon's light will serve as a lantern and asks everyone to stay close to him. The white-haired mage responds, stammering, as he is still very shaken by the situation. The small dwarf is also terrified by the darkness and the pressure of that sinister place. But the trio's leader stays focused and thinks that in the end, this battle is his to fight. He understands that he needs to handle everything himself to protect his inexperienced friends. It's explained that he's in a terrible situation, leading rookies against the final enemy. The elf asks if there are no demons there, as the place is strangely quiet. The protagonist explains that the blood zone is the lair of the main brain's host. Because of this, that place is extremely protected, and no one can enter without permission. Suddenly, a giant monster with sharp teeth and a purple eye appears in front of them. The group leader then finishes his sentence, saying that's why the hosts are always alone. The two rookies are completely paralyzed with fear by the presence of that creature. The small dwarf starts to cry and says the monster is only a little bigger than the others, but the overwhelming pressure that the demon emanates shows that its power is much greater. The demon then unleashes all its power, becoming even larger and more muscular than before. The creature is now gigantic, and its intimidating presence dominates the entire area. The small dwarf screams, in terror that the monster's size just doubled in an instant. Without wasting time, the demon attacks with its sharp claws, destroying the rocks on the ground. But the trio's leader smiles and tells his friends to get ready for the coming fight. With that, the monster swings its giant arm to try to crush the three heroes at once. Our hero then gets into position and prepares to defend against the blow with his greatsword. The impact of the attack is brutal and sends a shower of rock shards against the swordsman. Even with the immense force, he manages to hold back the blow, protecting his two companions. The creature is surprised to see that a mere human managed to stop its powerful attack. Then the young man unleashes a wave of energy and manages to repel the monster, sending them all flying, down and injured. The protagonist breathes with difficulty, but doesn't give up the fight. The white-haired mage is shocked and says what his leader just did is unbelievable. The small dwarf also can't believe it, and stammers upon seeing that the great demon was pushed back. The swordsman remains on the ground, catching his breath after that superhuman effort. Suddenly, a strange piece of the monster's body falls to the ground in front of the group of heroes. The trio's leader then gets up and approaches to check what that item on the ground is. With a dagger, he cuts the organ, and a golden liquid starts to drip from inside it. It's explained that this is a Grothin's rib, a rare organ from high-level demons. The two rookies instinctively feel the powerful energy emanating from that special rib. The protagonist then tells himself that he needs to eat that rib no matter what. Without hesitation, he takes a big bite and swallows a piece of the demonic organ in front of him. It's explained that the resonance of that special part creates an uncontrollable desire in a person. Because of this, whoever has a compatible wavelength feels an urge to chew and swallow it. The rib's energy spreads throughout his body like a powerful electric current. He then realizes that this isn't a simple digestion like he initially thought. With a smile, the young man understands that this is actually a union of power with the rib. A dark and powerful aura surrounds his body, and he tests his newly acquired strength. The two rookies are completely shocked by their leader's demonstration of power. He stands up, and his presence is now much more imposing and stronger than before. It's explained that the proteins from the rib amplified his power to his body's limit. This means that the swordsman's combat power just tripled in a few seconds. And this is information that isn't even in the bestiary of known demons. He then says that the two of them must have also felt a wave of shared consciousness. The leader warns that the battles will get more brutal, but the reward is determined by contribution. Therefore, he decides that information about rewards should be shared within the squad. The swordsman then declares that this is their rule for surviving as transcendents. With a shout of determination, the two rookies agree with their leader's new rule. The white-haired mage thinks that his leader has a perspective that doesn't seem human. It's revealed that the protagonist already knew that in the future, he would have to face more than just battles. The narrator explains that war is not won with just swords and spears on the battlefield. He says the dirtiest part of it all are the political games played by those who remain hidden. The protagonist had already noticed the cowardice of his superiors, who stole his achievements. Meanwhile, the names of those who truly fought and shed their blood. The young man already felt that their names would be completely erased from the historical records. Elsewhere, an old man with an eye patch is attacked by a creature and thinks it's too late. Lying on the ground, he desperately wonders if he's going to go out in such a pathetic way. At that moment, he has a flashback and remembers an elf friend who refused to drink. He also recalls his friend getting a big scolding from his wife because of him. Injured, the old man laments because he lived in a world full of regrets and pain. But even so, he gets up with a determined look and doesn't give up the fight. With that, the warrior charges forward and is surrounded by masked soldiers with sharp spears. One of the soldiers then observes the scene and yells that the demons are being defeated. Another elf adds, shocked, that the creatures are being completely annihilated. Seeing the victory, a winged warrior orders everyone to deactivate the protective barrier. With that, the purple swamp begins to disappear, and a glowing leaf falls to the ground. The warrior says that's a white cloud tree, proving there are no demons nearby. One of the elves celebrates and says the air in the place suddenly became clean with the victory. But suddenly, a giant and mysterious figure emerges in front of them in the middle of the mist. The elves look at the scene, completely shocked and not understanding what is happening. The figure was actually our hero and his two companions emerging from the swamp's mist. An elf with a scar on his face thinks that he was prepared for the troops' total annihilation. With that, a flashback shows the members who survived the battle responding quickly to the attack. And this result was only achieved thanks to the efforts of the Transcendents led by Gate. With a smile on his face, the scarred elf thinks that those guys really achieved victory. The scene then shows the entire army celebrating the great achievement of the small group of heroes. At that, the protagonist spits on the ground in disgust while being supported by an elf archer. A dark-skinned elf with white hair scoffs at the scene and calls the others brats. But the winged commander appears and scolds him for having his mouth full on the job. The swordsman then complains that his superior is making a big deal over nothing at the camp. He thinks that if they could enter the Bloodlands, they could easily destroy them all. The young man then realizes that the other soldiers haven't faced the enemy's main body. Because of this, the danger of the demon race doesn't seem real to the other soldiers there yet. Then the protagonist faces a woman who smiles, and the difference in their perspectives is shown. And they also didn't realize that this was a critical moment for the Federation's survival. A commander then orders the soldiers to start repairing the walls and building camps. A memorial is shown with 11 wounded, and 4 fallen in the last great battle against the monsters. An elf archer gets ready and thinks that now, sacrifices are completely unavoidable. With that, she fires an arrow that hits a purple energy monster on the battlefield. The elf then says they need to hurry and build the defenses because the monsters have returned. Atop the wall, 2 soldiers are talking, and one of them says that conquering the lands isn't the end. A commander then calls a soldier named Asen to help him with an important task, but the young man complains that he needs to move materials and that his knees are hurting a lot right now. Angrily, the old man yells that the big guys need to help, and asks the protagonist to move the blocks. Then the swordsman picks up 2 giant stone blocks and carries them without any effort. The commander is completely shocked by his subordinate's absurd display of strength. Another soldier also watches the scene and is left speechless by what he just witnessed. The old man then asks if it isn't heavy, and the young man says it's pretty easy to carry. A female warrior asks if it's really not that heavy, and the commander tells her to try lifting the stone herself. Watching the scene, a young soldier understands that this is the true power of a transcendent. The protagonist then stares at the ruins and thinks that the entire continent once belonged to the Federation. He then looks to the side and thinks about the word "cunity." With a very suspicious look at that moment, an inspector named Norman arrives and announces a message from headquarters. The old man asks what he wants. As everyone there is very busy with construction, the messenger then reveals that the next batch of recruits has already received their new powerful weapons. The commander is surprised by the news and says that this was much faster than usual. With that, the soldiers become hopeful for the arrival of their successors on the battlefield. Our hero observes the situation and seems to be thinking about something very important at that moment. The messenger then salutes and prepares to return to his position in the camp. It is then revealed that from within the red clouds, the sacred weapons have finally appeared. The first sacred weapon revealed is the Decaphon gauntlet, called Tear of Fury. At that moment, a soldier screams in desperation and confirms that the approaching troops are giants. With a smile on his face, the one-eyed commander says that this is great news for them. With that, a group of soldiers gathers and begins to laugh in a very malicious way. One of the warriors then smiles and thinks that his direct subordinate is finally arriving. He then clenches his fist and says that whoever the rookie is, he can consider himself a goner. With an insane look, the soldier finishes his sentence, saying he will show the recruit what a real nightmare is. The story takes us to a military training ground where an instructor is yelling at a bunch of recruits. Then, the white-haired man complains that these rookies from the giant clan are huge and noisy. Among them is recruit number 8, Goliath, a combat sambo champion, and we also have number 1, known as Titan. This is Titan, a muscular guy who is a 5-time decathlon champion and a world record holder. But the instructor isn't impressed and thinks these fancy titles are useless in a real war. With that, he wonders why a transcendent like him was sent to a boot camp at such a critical time and goes back to yelling. Meanwhile, an elf and a woman talk worriedly about how they're going to defend the front line by themselves. Elsewhere, a superior with an eye patch orders the instructor to handle the training of the giant clan's troops. The old man with the eye patch adds that it's more comfortable at the main base and that he should just get this new batch shipped out quickly. Our instructor realizes his superior is just afraid the blame will fall on him if something goes wrong. With no choice, the young man says that orders are orders and turns to leave. Just then, the superior calls him by his name, Maurice. As the young man walks away, Maurice then turns around with a smile and tells the elf to practice what he taught him. The elf gets all scared and stammers, saying he got the message from his superior. At that moment, the man with the eye patch looks at some papers and hopes those two can manage on their own. Outside, Maurice studies a paper and starts planning what he'll do on the first day. With a serious look, he tells someone to get out of the way so he can pass, and who appears is Goliath, now in armor, yelling for everyone to pay attention and complaining about the noise. She explains that the first day was supposed to be for rest, but a situation came up, and they'll have to do the exams now. The instructor then reveals that one of them will lift the Deca weapon and become a transcendent. The recruits get confused and start whispering about what this Deca weapon and transcendent could be. The woman then announces that the others will be sent to nearby units and must uphold the clan's honor. Maurice watches everything and thinks she's doing well, remembering that she practiced every night. He then sees a superior officer named Dronzer who looks worn out and asks to be put out of his misery. This elf was transferred to the kitchen and is crying because the giant clan members eat too much. In desperation, he grabs Maurice saying he'd rather fight demons than cook for 22 hours a day. Maurice then notices a cafeteria officer dragging a cook who tried to hide to avoid working. After that, an instructor tells everyone to form lines for the physical exam in the order their names are called. Some recruits crowd around a board to check the results of the physical exam that were just posted. Looking at the board, one of them comments that, based on the results, the candidates for Transcendent have been narrowed down to just 2. A chart shows the height and weight of Titan and Goliath, revealing that both are much larger than average. In the grip strength test, the guy also does slightly better than his direct rival. And even in the stone carrying challenge, the big guy manages to do more reps than Goliath. So, one of the recruits concludes that the 2 competitors are basically at the same power level. Meanwhile, Goliath is remembered as the great combat sambo champion in the open weight category. This gets the other recruits excited, wondering who will win the great showdown of the century. Recruit number 1 looks very serious and confident as he listens to the other soldiers' comments. A colleague tells the young woman that they're talking about her, but the fighter simply says to ignore them. However, one specific recruit gets annoyed because he thinks he and that other guy are in different leagues. Angrily, the man then walks toward the champion's group with a not so friendly look on his face. He then extends his bandaged hand to greet the girl, who watches him carefully. Next, the guy asks if she's Goliath and introduces himself with a confident smile on his face. The young woman confirms it's her and shakes the recruit's hand with a lot of force, showing her power. He smiles maliciously and says it's a great pleasure to finally meet her. The 2 shake hands with absurd strength, demonstrating their power to each other in that moment. One of the recruits watching the scene is surprised by the intensity of that handshake. Just then, the man asks what it's like to make money by getting paid to get beat up in exhibition matches. The girl becomes furious with the taunt and mentally curses the guy out because of the comment, but the recruit just laughs and says she handles the pain of that handshake very well. At that moment, another soldier appears to try and separate the 2 who were fighting on the first day. However, the provoker grabs his colleague and threatens him, telling him not to buzz around him or he'll get squashed. The fighter then warns him that if they were in a cage, he wouldn't even be able to move. The man just laughs scornfully at her threat and agrees in a very ironic way with her. He then turns and walks away with his group, leaving a very angry Goliath behind. Just then, a recruit named Baba comments that the guy seems disgusting and has a terrible personality. The bald guy says he's seen her fight and asks if she can sign his underwear, but she immediately refuses. He then suggests that she take that guy down during the next fight in the trench. The young woman becomes thoughtful at the suggestion and seems to consider the idea of fighting in the trench. Baba soon changes the subject to sweets, and the girl thinks that he talks too much for someone like him. Outside, an instructor makes the last call for anyone who needs to change their uniform size. In the repair room, Senior Officer Bronson talks to Morris about the new recruit uniforms. The young man agrees that with 2 celebrities enlisting, the superiors must have put in a lot of effort. He then remembers that his boss told the humans and dwarves to grab anything that fit. Then night falls, and a lights out warning is given throughout the camp for the recruits. In the barracks, the giant clan members complain that the sleeping bags are too tight. One of the recruits, named Baba, says he can't sleep because it's his first night there. He remembers his mother's advice to count to 100, but it only gave him a headache. Goliath, who is next to him, just thinks that this guy never stops talking about his mom. Suddenly, a voice from outside calls for recruit number 1, Titan, telling him to come out. The big guy gets up from his sleeping bag, confirming he understood the call he received. His rival stays awake and wonders if this might be some kind of special treatment. The man then leaves the barracks with a confident smile and a bluish glow around him. He then enters a room where one of his superiors was waiting for him for a talk. The man with the eye patch is signing a paper and asks what the recruit wants him to write. On the paper, we see the signature and a message wishing for Mr. Moe to be happy. The veteran then warns him that he may have been a hero out there, But here, he's just another recruit. The young man swears on the honor of his clan that he will dedicate himself fully to military training. The superior advises him not to make it obvious that the transcendent has already been decided, and to get along with the others. The recruit then salutes as the man with the eye patch and Goliath leave the room. The veteran comments that the young man isn't arrogant and seems to be a good kid, and the woman agrees. But the fighter thinks that, if he's going to be her successor, she'll show him what hell is really like. Outside, 2 guards complain about having to escort a recruit so late at night. They arrive at the barracks and tell recruit number 1 to get up and go to the headquarters. The young man calmly drinks something from a mug before following the guards out. One of the guards gets annoyed with the delay and hurries him, asking if he's deaf. Just then, the big guy appears behind them and whispers that a bunch of nobodies are trying to act tough. The guard is startled by his presence and asks what the heck the recruit just said. The man then pretends nothing happened and says he said absolutely nothing to the 2 of them. Annoyed, the guard yells at him and challenges him to repeat what he just said. The recruit then yells back that he didn't say anything, with a scary face, intimidating the guard. The big guy continues to scream that he didn't say a single word with a terrifying fury. At this, the guards get terrified and ask what's wrong with him, and if he's gone crazy. The recruit thinks about how weak they are, and without a single coin in their pockets to support themselves. To him, these guys are nothing more than a bunch of human beggars with nothing to their names. The man then wonders what they're trying to do if they can't even understand their own position. The pair of soldiers is left speechless, and one of them questions who he thinks he is to act like this. In his thoughts, the giant reinforces that the guards have no power or any kind of money. He continues his mental judgment, calling them useless trash from other races. The young man then questions what they're trying to do if they don't even recognize their place. One of the soldiers gets angry and yells that this is insubordination against a superior officer. Out of patience, the recruit grabs the guard's face with his huge hand, silencing the man. He then lifts both soldiers by their faces and dares them to go report him to the superiors. The big guy says he's had enough of the military and that they can send him to prison. With a swift move, the man throws the 2 guards hard against the wall. The pair falls to the ground, breathless, as the giant stares them down with an intimidating presence. He just calls them idiots and leaves, slamming the door very hard. Outside a tent, a voice calls out the name of the recruit who just left. Inside, the man with the eye patch scolds the 2 soldiers who got roughed up. The superior questions why they are so jealous of the new member of the giant clan. The 2 soldiers are speechless as their boss asks if they have an inferiority complex. An explanation reveals that the giant clan is rare and very valuable to the army for their skills. Then the man with the eye patch tells the 2 to get out of his sight as the big guy watches everything. Just then, a barrack mate asks the giant what he's up to, and he denies it. With a sly smile, the recruit says he has a feeling things are about to get interesting. Far away in Groton, the elf practices his magic and wonders how his officer is doing. Meanwhile, at the main camp, Geit sees Baba, a giant recruit, hit his head on the door. In the cafeteria line, the big guy asks for more food, but the cook tells him to get lost. At that moment, Goliath appears and authoritatively tells the cook to hand her the ladle. The fighter then takes the ladle and serves herself an absurd amount of food on her tray. The cook is shocked by the scene and calls her a greedy fatty as she serves herself. Maurice asks a recruit about the things on his head, and he explains they are spider webs. With that, the instructor comments that being big has its disadvantages, but the recruit thinks there's a reason for it. Just then, 2 recruits comment on the instructor's fame, who took down 2 enemies at once, but one of them wonders why he is still just a senior officer and speculates about promotions. Hearing the conversation, Maurice sarcastically says that triple the pay and a lifetime pension aren't merits. The soldiers then debate the reliability of the pension but agree that the triple pay is a fact. They start discussing becoming a transcendent, and one of them says it's not for just anyone. Annoyed by the conversation, Titan stands up and ends up knocking over his colleagues' food trays. He then tells the two to clean up the mess themselves and walks away with a serious look on his face. The two recruits are left behind, not knowing what to do with the food spilled on the room's floor. From a distance, Baba watches the big guy leave and calls him a punk for his arrogant and rude attitude. Next, the bald recruit offers to take the trays, saying he was leaving anyway. His colleague Goliath questions him, saying he's too nice for cleaning up another recruit's mess. The fighter thinks for a moment and realizes that her colleague's accent is very different. Outside, an instructor announces that the next exercise will be pillar planting on site. Goliath explains that the task is to hit the demon-faced targets embedded in the cliff. She adds that they saw recruit number 1 demonstrate, and that they should do exactly as he did. One of the recruits is warned to be careful, as accidents happen every year in that place. The instructor yells that the targets are close and wonders how no one can hit them. Then, recruit number 8 is called and prepares, lifting a huge pillar without difficulty. With a war cry, the young woman hurls the pillar with absurd force toward the target. The pillar hits the center of the target with a devastating impact, shattering the stone wall. The other recruits are impressed by the scene and realize that it was actually possible. Titan, watching from a distance, gives a slight smile, seeming challenged by her strength. Baba then compliments Goliath's throw and asks where she's from because of her accent. He says he's from the north and asks if his accent is sexy, but she tells him to knock it off. The young woman asks if the north isn't where the Corona plague was currently spreading. The bald guy brags that his clan is immune to plagues, and that only inferior humans succumb. Goliath then questions if there really is a giant clan settlement in the place he mentioned. He gets flustered and says there are a good number of them there, and then he's called for the exercise. Then, recruit number 15 gets ready for his throw, lifting a giant pillar. With a powerful thrust, the big guy launches the pillar with all his might toward the target, but the throw goes wide, and the pillar looks tiny as it flies aimlessly through the sky. The instructor gets annoyed and asks if this is some kind of protest, and why he didn't even try to hit it. Just then, two recruits comment that in the end, only Goliath and Titan managed to hit the target. The big guy then smiles with contempt and calls all the other recruits idiots. The superior orders the recruit, who threw a tantrum, to sing a song, and he promptly accepts the order. The man then begins to sing a song about missing his dear mother. He continues the song, saying he's a terrible singer and calling himself a mama's boy. Titan finds the scene pathetic while the other recruits boo their colleague's performance. One of the recruits then comments to his friend how that giant is a total jerk. Far away, a guard complains that his boss, Moe, doesn't believe a word they say. The two soldiers agree that the giants are a closed-off group, and they just need to survive for 6 weeks. Suddenly, Titan appears at the door and surprises the two guards who were talking by themselves. He taunts them, asking why he hasn't been sent to prison yet, and if they ratted him out. One of the guards becomes furious and curses at the giant for his arrogant and mocking attitude. Elsewhere, Maurice carries a heavy bag and complains that his superior should be doing the work. The white-haired instructor then stops for a moment, sensing that something strange is happening. He turns around and sees Titan sitting on a staircase with another recruit beside him. And to his surprise, the two guards from before are tied up and shirtless, looking injured. The giant then dries himself with a towel, with the two tied up and fallen soldiers behind him. The scene cuts back to the recruits, commenting on the instructor's fame as a transcendent. At that, the giant gives a sinister and malicious smile as he watches the situation unfold. Maurice then approaches and asks what they are doing and why the guards are shirtless. One of the soldiers points at the giant and accuses him of being responsible for this whole mess. The big guy tries to hold back his laughter with a hand over his mouth, finding the whole situation very amusing. He then stands up and faces the instructor, saying he's heard a lot about him. The man introduces himself as Titan and says he came to introduce himself since he'll be joining the Transcendent Force. The instructor just stares at him with a serious look, his yellow eyes glowing intensely. The giant then extends his hand for a handshake, with the senior officer present there. With a confident smile, he says he's going to assess just how strong this so-called transcendent is. The two shake hands, and a powerful energy is released at the moment of their greeting. The big guy applies immense force, trying to crush the instructor's hand, who kneels. But the man is surprised because the officer doesn't seem to be reacting to his show of power. The silver-haired young man then calmly asks what he thinks he's doing there. He stares at him with a sinister smile, his yellow eyes glowing menacingly. Maurice then shows his true strength and asks if that was what the giant was trying to do. The big guy is in shock from the pain, and his expression changes completely from confident to terrified. He then lets out a scream of pure agony as his hand is crushed by the instructor.